Hey, welcome back to Business 150, Introduction to Management. We are continuing our examination of the impact of the external environment on management. How are we supposed to respond? What are we called to do as managers, making wise decisions and accomplishing our organization's goals in light of the environment in which our organizations exist? And as you can tell, the title slide for this fourth video, we are looking at how to analyze the external environment. How do we methodically, scientifically, and rationally analyze the most important elements of the external environment to understand how we as managers might be called to respond? That's what this particular video will be all about. We hope that after you finish this video, you should be able to do at least two things. Specify why the external environment is important for organizations, and assess the environmental forces affecting business. So, let's ask you this question. When you think of the odds of a good outcome coming out, what are the odds of an investment in a particular industry paying off? Let's say that, for instance, you have, $50,000 free that you want to invest in some stocks in your Charles Schwab or E-Trade portfolio, and you decide to put them all into one particular industry. Well, which industry? Banking? Commercial airlines? Technology? Hotel and gaming? Retail? What industry should you invest in? And some obvious questions. Do different industries offer better returns? What's the average return on any of these industries? How is it different to be in the airline business or the software business or the automobile business or the cloud services business? What's the payoff? And the way I put it sometimes is, quite frankly, it's just like Vegas, baby. If you decided to go to Vegas and you decided to go in there with, $5,000 to gamble, you can see here the gaming floor of a typical casino. I think this is actually a sports book at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. I think that's where this picture comes from. Nevertheless, if you decided to go to Vegas and gamble $5,000 over a weekend, where would you gamble? What would you play? Would you play blackjack? Would you play craps? Would you play slot machines? Would you bet on football games? You realize that each one of those games has a different odds of returns. And for many of us, we end up making that decision not necessarily based on the odds. We make our decision what game we're going to play based on what we're familiar with. We know the rules. We've played it before. Maybe we've had good fortune and won some money playing it before. That's where we're comfortable sitting down. Rather than that some game you don't know the rules, you just have to figure it out. Well, investing in an industry is a lot like that. Why is that? Because different industries have different rates of return. As you can see here, this is an old slide back from 2002 to 2011. So this slide is 9 years old, but nevertheless, you can see there with these 5 different industries: air transportation, computer software, drugs, pharmaceuticals, hotel gaming, and retail. You can see significantly different rates of returns on each year. Imagine the difference between investing $50,000 in the computer software business, that is the purple line that has the highest rate of return in 2011, versus investing instead in perhaps in the hotel gaming industry, which has the lowest rate of return there in the teal green. You can imagine when you're just ticking around 7% return versus earning something closer to 25% return in 2011, it's a much different result from investing in different industries. And so part of the question is, if you're examining different industries, how do you assess the odds or the likelihood or the competitiveness, to put it another way, of earning a higher rate of return on invested capital? How do you make the assessment that certain industries are better payoffs than others? Well, a Harvard professor developed something and published it called The Five Forces. His name was Michael Porter. He still teaches at Harvard, I believe, from time to time. Also has run a hedge fund and done some other things. Very well-known man. Michael Porter and his five forces. Now, just to give a little bit of history here, Michael Porter did not actually create or discover the five forces. Rather, he borrowed them from another field of academic study. That field of academic study is known as industrial economics. Industrial economics. And what do industrial economists typically do? What industrial economists typically do is they work for the government. And I call them the big cosmic killjoys in business because their whole job is to look at different industries and recognize potential opportunities where players in a particular industry might make more money than they should. And they say, well, you got to stop that. How dare you make more money than just a reasonable rate of return on invested capital? You earn more than that? We are going to alert the government that maybe they need to regulate your industry to stop you from making too much money. So they're sort of the big killjoys, right? And the tools they use, you can see here, they examine industries for these five forces in the industry to see if the way that these five forces balance out might provide an opportunity for a company to make higher than normal economic profit. Well, what Michael Porter did was he took the exact same five forces and says, I'm going to take back the night from the night, or however you want to put it. We're going to use these for the force of business rather than the government. We're going to use these five forces to analyze different industries and see, hey, does this industry, at least for a period of time, does it present a potential opportunity for a player in that industry to make higher than normal economic profit? Maybe you should get in while the getting is good. And you can see there the five potential forces there. So let's talk a little bit about them. The first one, the threat of new entrants. How easy is it for competitors to enter the marketplace? What about competitive rivalry? How fierce is the competition between the firms already in the industry? What about the threat of substitute products? How easy is it for a consumer to find an alternative product or service to replace your offering if they don't like it, or the price goes too high, or for some reason they want to sub out something else for your product? How easy is it for them to find a substitute? Fourth, what is the power of buyers, the extent to which buyers influence market rivals? And finally, what's the power of suppliers, the extent to which suppliers influence market rivals? So let me see if I can give you some examples of these five forces just so that you can try them on for size, right? So let me ask a question. Let's say that you decided to start a new business, and your business is you're going to start selling stuffed animals on the internet. How easy is it, when we talk about the first force, the threat of new entrants, how easy is it for someone to come in and compete with you? And the answer is incredibly easy, right? Nowadays, there's a handful of middle schoolers who can brew up a website from scratch, writing HTML code, right, in the span of a weekend. It's incredibly easy for someone to create a website, find a source to find, purchase stuffed animals in bulk, and immediately be competing with you if you start making money, right? If you are you have an attractive market opportunity, chances are someone else is going to say, how easy is it for me to get a little slice of the steak off your plate? And in this particular type of an industry, right, that's something that a middle schooler or a high schooler could possibly brew up in a weekend, a website to compete with you, right? So in that case, when the threat of new entrants is high, it might be difficult for anyone to earn anything higher than normal economic profit, right? And let me be careful about that phrase. Normal economic profit does not mean that nobody makes money. It just means that everyone makes a reasonable, average, normal economic profit and no more. And so it's not a very attractive industry for folks who are looking to make an extraordinary amount of return on invested capital, right? So where the threat of new entrants is high, it's not that attractive. But let's say you were thinking, I'm going to compete against the Intel Corporation. I'm going to start commercially manufacturing silicon chips for computer makers. How easy is it for you to enter into that industry? What would you need? Well, you'd probably need $500 million in capital. Oh, and manufacturing relationships. Very, very sophisticated high-tech manufacturing capabilities. Oh, your own intellectual property in terms of chip design so that you're not stealing someone else's patents. Basically, it's incredibly difficult for anyone to get into that industry to compete against the giants in silicon chip manufacturing. And that means it's an opportunity for those folks who are already there to earn higher than normal economic profit, because it's really hard for people to come in and compete. I hope that makes sense. That's the first force, the threat of new entrants. Let's talk about the second threat, competitive rivalry. How active and fierce is the level of competitive rivalry with players who are already in the industry? So consider for a moment, for instance, your average street corner in an urban district, where perhaps on all four corners of that intersection, there is a gas station. A Chevron station, a Valero station, right? A Phillips 66 station, independent gas station. Hey, and here's the question. If the 76 station lowers their price by 50 cents a gallon, what are the other three gas stations going to probably have to do that very day? Well, you know the answer. They're probably have to drop their prices as well, because the competition on that street corner is fierce. And many people make their decisions based on price alone, and therefore the competition is fierce. It's difficult to earn any economic profit other than average and normal. Now, that being said, let me give you another example. Consider that at a McDonald's franchise, you can never ever get a Pepsi-Cola product, and at a Taco Bell franchise, you can never ever get a Coca-Cola product. That's, of course, because those two enormous corporations have exclusive contracts with their beverage suppliers, right? Here's my question. How active do you think that Coke is fighting to try and kick PepsiCo out of Taco Bell? And how fiercely do you think that PepsiCo is fighting against Coke to try and get them kicked out of Coca-Cola? And the answer is, quite frankly, not very hard at all. They're perfectly happy with the status quo because each of those corporations probably have close to 40% market share globally. They're perfectly happy with the status quo, no reason to rock the boat. And so what you'll find is in industries where you have two or possibly three dominant players with the lion's share of market share, the level of competitive rivalry is actually quite low compared to the situation like the gas station situation, where you have many competitors and none of them have a dominant percentage of market share. In that situation, the competition will be much more fierce. So that's competitive rivalry, right? If you have dominant amounts of market share in the hands of a few players, it's probably an opportunity to earn higher than normal economic profit. Let's look at the third force, the threat of substitute products. What's this natural substitute for butter? That's right, margarine, right? That's pretty easy, right? If the price of butter goes too high, what does everybody do? They start buying margarine instead. But here's a trickier question. What's the substitute product for coffee? Is it tea? Is it energy drinks? Is it plain old water? Is it, you see, it's a little more difficult, right? Because the question is, why is someone buying coffee in the first place? Is it for the caffeine? Is it because they want a warm beverage? Is it because they're thirsty? What's the reason? What's the need that's being filled? And only then can you answer what are natural substitute products. Here's an even more difficult one. What is the natural substitute product for video games? Is it going to the movies? Is it just getting outside, Is it going to the opera or the symphony or playing board games, or you fill in the blank, right? And again, the real answer to that question first has to understand what is the need, the consumer need that's being filled. And so I want to tell you right up front, with the threat of substitute products, that can be a little tricky to understand. You're not asking yourself, what is like butter? Well, of course, margarine is like butter. No, but the question you have to ask is, what is the consumer buying need that is perceived to be filled by that product? Only then can you correctly identify what are the possible substitute products. And of course, the point in our analysis here is, if your product and service has many very affordable substitutes, you probably can't raise your prices very high, which means you probably won't have an opportunity to earn higher than normal economic profit. However, if there really is no fitting exact substitute for your product, that probably does represent an opportunity to earn higher than normal economic profit. All right, let's go number 4, the power of buyers. How much can buyers influence sellers? How much can your buyers influence you? So for instance, what's the price of gas nowadays? Let's say the price of gas is around $3 a gallon or so. I don't know, somewhere around there. Let's say that I think that's too high. In fact, I am not going to buy another single dollar of gas until they lower the price to $2 a gallon. That's it. I'm boycotting. What's going to happen? Because I boycott, will they drop the price? No. You know that. The only thing that's going to happen is I am going to lose about 20 pounds because I'm going to have to walk everywhere, right? Because the buyer has no influence, individual buyer has no influence over the seller, right? They don't care about me as an individual, right? Now, let's flip that around. Let's talk to you a little bit about the Boeing 737. Specifically the model 737 that Boeing has sold for years. Why do I ask you to consider that? Because it is the only model of airplane that Southwest Airlines flies. They don't fly any other model of airplane. That, of course, helps them to lower their maintenance costs because they only have to maintain one model of airplane. But the point is, they're the world's largest purchaser of Boeing 737s. So let's say that Boeing next year releases another variant of the 737. And Southwest Airlines says, okay, we're going to purchase 47 airplanes, but we want them all delivered on this date to this hub. We want you to drop the price 7%, and we want these 3 other features installed on all of them. What do you think Boeing's going to do? I'll tell you what. Boeing's going to deliver on time where Southwest says, with the features, they're going to drop the price 7%. Why? Because in that situation, the buyer has a very large influence over the seller because it's the largest buyer of that particular model of airplane. I hope that makes sense. All right. Finally, let's look at the power of suppliers. All right. So let's say that you are a seller of navel oranges. You sell navel oranges to grocery stores, big grocery store chains, and you have a son who is now going to a very expensive college, so you pick up the phone and you say, hey, Safeway, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to raise the prices that I'm selling navel oranges to you by 75 cents per bushel pound, or whatever they measure it. You know what Safeway's going to do? He's going to say, thank you so much for letting me know. He's going to hang up, immediately pick up the phone to another supplier and say, hey, I'm going to double your contract. I've decided to stop buying oranges from the first guy. I'm going to buy them from somebody else, because in that case, the supplier has no influence over the buyer. But here's another situation. What happens to Dell Computer, the manufacturer and seller of Windows PCs and laptops? What happens to Dell Computer if Microsoft says, hey, we've decided to release Windows 15, and by the way, it's going to be the greatest version of Windows you've ever seen, and therefore we're doubling the price to you, Dell Computer. What's Dell going to do? What can they do? They're not going to start building Macs. They're not going to start just selling Linux machines, right? What are they going to do? They're going to pay double the price for every installation of Windows, and of course they're going to pass the cost on to us as buyers, right? But in that case, because there's only one supplier of the Windows operating system. Microsoft owns that game. And therefore, a much higher opportunity to earn higher than normal economic profit. Well, I need you to study how Porter's Five Forces works and to understand that this is a durable, insightful way to analyze an industry and its external environment to make an assessment if an industry is attractive to earning higher than normal economic profit. That's why we talk at length in this lecture about Porter's Five Forces. And what I want to tell you is Porter's Five Forces works. And the example I want to give you, you see here right on the slide, a company called Cardinal Health. Cardinal Health, you probably have never heard of them unless you actually work in the medical industry. But if you work in the medical industry, you probably heard of Cardinal Health. They are currently number 16 on the Fortune 500. They are a huge company. But what I want to tell you is that Cardinal Health did not start out life as Cardinal Health. Cardinal Health started out life as a company called Cardinal Foods. That's right. They were a family-owned food distribution company in the Midwest, and quite frankly, they weren't making very much money. They were not making anything over normal economic profit. Life was difficult, the business was difficult, and they had very high costs and didn't make very much on the margin. And like many family-owned businesses, the father decided when his son was college age, I'm going to send him to Harvard. And so his son went to get his master's degree at Harvard and studied Michael Porter's Five Forces when he was there. And when he came back home, he graduated, came back to work at the family business. He analyzed the food distribution business and reached the conclusion using Porter's Five Forces, this industry will never have an opportunity to earn higher than normal economic profit. We need to find something else that we can do with the skill set we have, with the competitive advantages we have, but some other type of industry we can earn higher than normal economic profit. And so he looked at the healthcare product distribution business. And that's where they began to migrate, to the point that now, if you get some pills or a wheelchair or a splint or some crutches from a hospital or from your medical provider, there's probably a 90% chance that Cardinal Health touched that somewhere in the distribution supply chain. That's why they went from a struggling food distribution company to now what? Number 16 on the Fortune 500. Why do I tell you this story? To prove to you Porter's Five Forces works. You should get good at using Porter's Five Forces to analyze and understand what are the opportunities in particular industries. And so we do hope that that provides you, at least, as we mentioned at the beginning, right, that you can have a better idea why the external environment is important for organizations, and that you have at least one new tool to assess the environmental forces affecting business today. Yes, indeed, the external environment that business faces is incredibly crucial and significant to a firm's potential success. You, as a manager, need to know how to understand and analyze and gain insight from your analysis of the external environment to look for opportunities where you might have to earn higher than normal economic profit, to be successful, and to accomplish organizational goals. I hope that's helpful. We shall see you in the next video.